Hello, welcome to the lesson on how to avoid the mud. But before we go any further, this lesson is an extension of the two previous lessons, colour theory and colour wheel. So please ensure that you've studied and understand those two lessons before progressing here. Okay, mud. What do I mean by that? Well, when things go bad with a pour and the colours don't turn out how we planned and they turn out looking a little bit brown, this brown result is the mud. I have poured a lot of mud when I first started pouring. To better understand how the mud is formed, we can learn a lot from the colour wheel. The reverse side of the colour wheel provides us with a great insight into how colours will react when they are mixed. Red and green. Let's look at what colour we get if we mix red with green. Yes, you guessed it, brown mud colour. Now, a favourite colour combination of mine is violet and yellow. Again, you guessed it, if we mix these two colours together in a pour, we will also get brown mud. So, we should always avoid pouring these colours together, unless you have a plan. And we do have a plan. And it's based on my understanding that there are three primary influences of the muddy outcome of your pour. Number one, colours. As we've discussed, getting the right combination is crucial to avoid the mud. But for this pour, we want to use four colours. And you guessed it, red, green, violet and yellow. The four masters of brown mud, all on the same pour. The second most influential factor in the mud is consistency. Now, the trick to avoid the mud is to make your paint consistency thick enough to have minimal paint mixing and bleeding between the colours. And finally, layering. Now, there is a knack to layering your colours to avoid mud. And with these four colours, we need to be extra careful when layering our paints into the pot. We use a stirring stick and let the colours flow down the stick and into the pot as we pour them. And we always layer our colours in the order that they appear on the colour wheel. So, in our pour today, we want to use red, green, yellow and violet. So we start by layering the red colour first. Then we layer the yellow colour on top of the red. And then the green on top of the yellow, and then finally the violet. You can also layer them in the opposite order. Okay, violet first and red last. Another option, but one that would distract from our colour scheme today, is to add a bit of white, black or grey between the colour layers. But I just want to make it more difficult and stick to the four muddy colours. So, let's see if it works. We will be pouring onto four canvas. On all four canvas, we'll be using the dreaded four colour mud combination, and we'll be doing an open cup pour. In pour one, we will use thinner consistency paints and we will not layer correctly. Any order and just poured straight in. In pour two, we'll have the same thinner consistency paints, but we will layer them correctly. In pour three, we will have slightly thicker paints, but again, not layered correctly. And the final pour will be our best effort to reduce the mud, using slightly thicker paints and layering them very carefully and correctly. So, if my theory works, pour one should be the worst and pour four should be the best. Now the judging will be on whether we can still clearly identify all four colours and the pour with the least amount of brown mud colour that has been created. So, here goes. This is your last chance for placing side bets. Any takers? Well, if you'd placed a bet on 1, 2 or 3, I think I would have taken your money. Well, what a great lesson. Well, that's just my opinion, of course. Pour number 1 is very bad. Lots of brown, definitely a scraping job there. Pour number 2 actually turned out better than I thought it would. It does have quite clear colour separation and looks quite nice. Still has quite a bit of brown, but okay. Now pour 3, I thought it would have turned out better than number 2 because of the thicker paints. But we can hardly see the yellow and it is lacking contrast between the colours. And pour 4. If you consider we are probably using the worst 4 colour combination possible, and we're pouring with low-cost craft paints, and we're pouring them onto a reused old canvas, I think that that's pretty remarkable. And I'll tell you, is much better than I thought it would be with this 4 colour combination. And for me, the fact that the layering process seems, from this pour anyway, to improve the outcome of the pour and reduce the mud more so than the consistency. That is something that has surprised me. Now, obviously with some pours, like Dutch pours, where you don't layer the paint and the paint consistency is normally thinner than normal, I think you will still struggle with this 4 colour combination. But the 2 big takeaways from this lesson for you are: buy and study a colour wheel, and then come back and visit this and the previous lesson again and again if need be. And do pay a lot of attention to the order that you pour and layer your paints, and in particular if you've selected any of these risky colour combinations. And one final tip: if after all of this you're still not sure if the colours you have chosen will work out okay, before you mix your paints, pour a little drip of each colour onto a plastic sheet or onto the palm of your hand, and then mix them up with your finger to check. See you next lesson. Bye bye.